Holy crap, I cannot believe it's episode 50. That means we've done this 50 times and at least one person has listened to this 50 times outside of us and our moms. Okay.
Right.
That's crazy. That is nuts. So thank you everyone that you've listened for 50 episodes. I guess probably 52 probably would have been more significant. I probably shouldn't be getting excited about this, but I am because that's a good number. Um, but yeah, I'll stop rambling. I'm excited about this episode. It's gonna be a good one. It's gonna be a banger.
You're all good, man. I got excited when I typed that 50 in there too. So we'll have to
Yeah.
make some sort of big celebration at 52. But hey, have you ever
Sweet.
talked to someone that was in a conversation with you and they only seemed to hear maybe half of what you said? May- Maybe the rest of the time they
Is
seem
that
ready to just,
rhetorical? Or you're
I
asking me
mean,
right now?
you can answer it. Go ahead. I'm sure we've all
Yes.
experienced it. Yeah,
Yes, I
right.
have.
Just once or twice.
Just
It,
once or twice, that's it.
Yeah. It seems like they're ready to just jump in and take over talking, right? They're always got that answer ready, or maybe it's an answer for part of what you said. And maybe that's you. Maybe you realize you're the one that's just been listening to your, or you listen to a part of what somebody said, and then you're thinking about what you can say next. And now you realize you missed a absolute ton of what was being said. And you can't go back and say, "Hey, I'm sorry. I wasn't listening. I was thinking about what I wanted to say next." I mean, you probably should, but we don't, because, that we look stupid then. Um, Listening is such a powerful tool that we really overlook. And
Mhm.
sometimes we just ignore it because we don't want to. It takes work, it takes effort, but it is the key to understanding. And it's a skill that we rarely develop as leaders, as individuals.
Yeah, that's funny. I mean, there is this like you have this talks with people sometimes and you're like, man, it was so upsetting. I had a bottle of ink my cat knocked over or something, and it got all over this shirt that I got from, you know, Ireland, and it was one of my favorites. And their response is, "I have a cat." And you're like, "What?"
Yes.
Like, but
Right.
it's very true. Like there are, and I'm guilty of this, hardcore guilty of this, of not fully listening and engaging in what the other person's saying. And it was recently kind of like knocked on my butt by a question that someone asked me, and not like directly, but were telling me about this like practice or this like visual picture you can do. And what they said is, if my arm, I try to get the frame right, if my arm were a sentence, where in the sentence of somebody else do you stop listening and start thinking about how you're going to respond?
Wow.
And I was like, mm, it's close to the pit. Like, it's it's not at the tip, it's close to the pit on this one, and that's where, like, you wonder, why do we do this? Like, why are we so eager to respond?
Yeah.
And I think it's the very reason we should be listening, and I wanna respond because I want to be understood.
Hmm.
We do, and that is just human nature to want to be understood. But listening is deeper. It's more about understanding than being understood. Why don't we listen? Why are we so eager to respond? I think some of it's fear, like fear of not having something intelligent to say, fear of looking stupid, fear of not being interesting enough. I've heard all of these. I've felt all of these. But when we live in fear, we downplay our strengths. We downplay our connection with that person.
Hmm.
So listening, I think, is that missing part of communication. Really do. I think that um, when you think about listening, there's got to be a difference between that and hearing, right? Like there's got to be a pivotal difference. And so I think it would probably be better to say um, that hearing is just passively like a passive intake of noise or sound. That's
Hmm.
hearing. It's like you're allowing that noise to enter your head. Listening is an intentional working to comprehend what's being heard. That's different. And it's not always just what's being said. Like active listening is like being, I don't know if you've ever gone hunting before. I've gone
No.
hunting many times and never got anything. So really I was just out in the woods. It was beautiful, but
It's gorgeous. It
it
sounds
is
amazing.
interesting how when you're walking in the woods, you're really just like kind of hearing, right? But when you're sitting down to hunt or to act like you're hunting like me, um, and you all of a sudden hear just leaves crinkle, how active and intent you become
Mm,
on comprehending and understanding what it is that I just heard. And that becomes listening. That's why when like people are sneaking around and trying to be quiet and you're sneaking around with somebody else and I'm thinking obviously like when you're a little kid or something and you're playing hide and seek, you're like, wait, listen, you don't go, wait, here. Like
right.
there's the idea that listening and like so we understand this, I think, at a deep level, but I think Stephen Covey said it best. He said most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. We don't
Mm,
actively listen to others. And so we're not actively listening to understand others. When you think about communication, if listening is that missing part of communication, which I believe it is, communication is an input and then a receiving of that input.
mhm,
So we have speaking, right? That's some type of information is being given. Well, there is two options. Well, I guess there's a third. Don't hear or listen at all. That's
right.
probably a third. But hearing is like that middle ground. It's not even. It's like you're not even actually getting the intent of what's being said. You're just getting information and something that you can regurgitate. But listening is actively being intent to say, what is it they're really getting at here? Um, and when we're not there, when we're not listening, we're living somewhere else. Okay, we're not living where we should be, and that's in the present. Listening is the act of being present.
Yeah, and with
So
that,
important.
without that listening, we're not going to know our team, right? As we bring this into where does this affect us, right? How does this affect leaders? We're not going to be able to know our team if we can't truly listen. If
Mm,
we're just listening or hearing with the intent of replying, like Stephen Covey said, like you had talked about, Blake, we're not going to understand these people. We're not going to understand anything about them. And they're going to become exactly like I just said, these people. They're not our team. They're not our community. They're not our family. They're not our people that we spend time with. They're just these people that maybe you spend some time with during the day or you work together. They're coworkers. But in order to properly lead a team, and I know we've talked about this in other episodes, there has to be that relationship there, right? We're always talking about how do we get from step one to step two, or level one to level two? How do we get from permission? I'm sorry, position to permission, right? That position level is, hey, you've been put in this position. Maybe you've received a promotion. You are leading these people, not because you know them, but because you've been given that responsibility. The next level is that permission level. And the only way to reach that, for them to give you permission to lead them, is to have that relationship with them. The only way to have a relationship is to listen, to learn about them, to understand what their struggles are, to know what their strengths are, to build that relationship on mutual trust because you've communicated your struggles and you've been open about yourself and you've been open about your background and they've done the same, and both of you have listened to each other and understood it and accepted it, right? You can't build this team up just by listening to a quarter or a half of what they say. You need to understand them entirely to be able to build that relationship and to build that trust and to keep that building of that team and that group moving forward.
yeah, you also miss their expectations. I think a
Mm,
lot of times in
yeah.
communication, we're just trying to get like high level the thing that they're talking about and not really like what is their deep expectation here. And we've we've got to know the expectation. See, when we don't listen and don't know their expectations, we miss the deeper understanding. Um, Unclear expectations. I heard this recently and it just hit hit to the core. But unclear expectations are just premeditated resentments. So when we do not fully understand what they're expecting, we start to build resentment with one another because we believe when I tell you something, I'm believing you understand what I'm saying. I'm believing you understand the
Right.
expectations I have. And then when it doesn't happen, I feel like, oh man, you're actively trying to go against me. And obviously that's my problem, but it still builds the resentment. So when we don't have that clear expectation and understanding, then we're going to allow for that to step into play.
Yeah. Man, that is so good. I love that premeditated resentments. It just is it's a perceived that you don't care, you don't give a shit. Man,
Mhm.
that's good. I think we need to flip it the other way too, right? So we've talked about how this affects a leader to the people that they lead. But what about those who are being led? For most of us, we're probably in a position where we have leaders above us too. And if we're not listening as our leaders are telling us the right path or where we're headed or what the vision is, we're going to miss all of that. We're going to have this unclear picture of where we're going with our communication or with our organization, with our community, with our family group, whatever it may be. We're going to miss that, right? And then all of a sudden, we're going to find ourselves completely disconnected from everything that's going on and from everyone. I know we've talked about using the example of going to Disney World, right? Disney World? Yeah, that's the one in Florida. Yeah, let's say you're going to Florida and your parents say to you, okay, we're going to Disney World. Make sure you get your, and then they say something, but you're not listening because you're just thinking about how high you're going to jump and how loud you're going to scream, right?
That's right.
You've missed now that they've said bring your swimsuit so that you can go on all the water rides. You get to Disney and you have nothing to wear. Now you've missed out on an entire portion of that vacation, that togetherness with the family. Maybe you have to sit by yourself while the whole family goes off and does this. We've missed that whole piece.
Mm,
It leaves emptiness. It leaves this feeling like you're disconnected from the group, from the organization, from the community, whatever your group is. We become disconnected and then we become resentful too,
mm,
because now, well, why didn't they tell me, or why didn't I bring this with me, or how did I miss that part of the information? They just weren't clear enough. We start putting the blame there. If we're not listening, we don't understand the path, we don't understand what's all going on. We've got to make
mm,
sure that we absorb all of the information as well from those who are leading us, so that we can implement whatever it is the goal is at that point.
mm. Yeah, when we understand others and they feel understood, I think this is where we start getting a little deeper. We're going to connect with people at a much deeper level, a trustworthy level, and not necessarily like you're becoming besties and like everything's about pillow talk and stuff like that. Cause I think that's where when we talk about connecting with people, their minds go to, well, I don't have to be best friends with everyone. And I'm not saying that. Okay. What I'm saying though is that we connect at a totally different level. Like almost think of those movies that we all love where the villain and the hero actually have some kind of connection that you respect. Like they respect one another because they understand one another. And it's not that they believe the same things. They're not pillow buddies. They're not besties. Like they are like opposition, but there is a different connection because they understand one another. This reminds me of a story about Benjamin Disraeli, the PM of, or the Prime Minister of, I want to say it was United Kingdom, but he was well loved. He he was at a dinner party one time, but I think he was getting elected or was in the process of it. And his opponent and him were both at this dinner party. And there was this, I don't know who she was, but she basically witnessed, went and talked to both of them. And she said, after talking to Benjamin's um, partner, or not partner, rather, the opponent, that she was like, I talked to him and I just thought he was the most interesting man in the world. Like he just is so well known. Like, wow, I
Mm.
can't believe he's done all these things. Like, this is unbelievable. And then she said, after talking to Benjamin Disraeli, she said, after talking to your opponent, I thought that he was the smartest and most interesting person in the world. After talking to you, though, I feel like I'm the most interesting
Mm.
person in the world.
Yeah.
And that is what somebody who is a good listener does is that they make everyone else feel connected, feel understood. And it's not like Benjamin Disraeli was amazing. You know, I'm not saying like in everything, but like he was a good prime minister. And for for someone to respond like that shows that active listening really does do something. Because people want to be understood. They want their communication to be received correctly. They want to be seen, and listening is that active gift of helping them feel understood. I think one thing we got to be careful about in communication is that we think, hey, the way I'm going to connect is to show them I'm just like them. And the way I'm going to show them
Mm.
I'm just like them is I'm going to have a story and an experience to share every time they share an experience or story.
Mm.
Like I'm guilty of this one too, but like this is not, don't do this. Okay. Don't make every story kind of like about the cat knocking over the ink and you're like, oh, I've got a cat. Like
Yeah.
that's, well, okay, cool. That is not what we want to be doing. We want to be actively understanding what is the depth of what they're working through. Um, right now, today, we are, and obviously this is recorded beforehand, but today we're having to do hard thing. My whole family and I are having to put our dog down, and it's just killing us all. And as I'm sharing that, there's depth. If Pete right now you were like, "Yeah, I've had to put my dog down too," I'd punch you in the face. Like
Yeah.
that's not like I'm not like, "Oh, because that's what I was looking for." I was looking to find out right in this moment as I'm going through this if you've had to put a dog down. That's what I was curious about. Like,
No.
no, if I'm sharing this information, it's because a side of me that wants to be seen, wants to be heard and understood, not looking for information to be exchanged and us to become better buddies in the moment, right? It's because I trust you to a certain degree that I'm even sharing it. So I think we just have to understand that we can't make someone else's experiences about my experiences.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm so sorry. I know you and your family are going through it right now, and I'm sorry about that.
Appreciate it.
Um, yeah. I think one thing that can easily get us caught up or tripped up rather is I think it's a misconception that listening is a natural thing and that it just kind of will come to you, right? We quote unquote do it our whole lives, so we'll be okay at it. I don't think that's true. I think it requires some effort on our part, probably quite a bit of effort actually on our part because it's not a natural thing. Naturally, we want to put ourselves out there. We want to put our experiences out there. Again, we want to be understood. We want to be seen. We want to be heard too. So it kind of goes against everything that we want for us to engage and to listen. But it's something we have to work on. If we want to build those relationships, we need to put in that effort because it doesn't come as a natural occurrence in our lives.
Mm. Yeah, it becomes pretty easy to feel when someone else is listening too. You know what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
kind of get that sense like I think this person's actually hearing me, but I think it's also really easy to know when they're not like hearing you. So when you feel that way, like if I was talking to you and I didn't feel like you were actively listening to me when you came to talk, I would just have no cares in the world to engage in that conversation. And I've been
Right.
there before. Like having those conversations, I end up saying very little after I feel like, yeah, this person's just not here. In fact, there are times that I kind of want to be like, man, wish you could have been here today. But I know
Yeah.
that that's not good. And that wouldn't lead to maybe the best things. But when you know someone is actively listening to you, you start leaning in and actively listening to them. And then you make better connections and you understand their expectations and you understand them better.
Mm.
Um, I think we think that good listening, because maybe we're taught this, I don't know, but I think we think that good listening is don't speak when others are speaking, right? That's check. Um, Let them know by visual cues that you are hearing them. Hmm. Okay. Yes.
Nodding of the head.
Ah. Wow. Mhm. Like, we think that that's in it, and now by the way, I do that stuff all the time, but hopefully because I'm actively listening, not because
Right.
I'm getting a check mark for first not talking, and then second for, like, giving them verbal and visual cues that I'm listening. And then it's being able to repeat what they've said back to you. Like, this is where all our fights come from in the household, okay? With the kids. When I'm like, "Hey, you need to please go do this. I need you to do this." And I'm like, they're like, "Okay." And I'm like, "What did I say?" And then they can say it back to me. I'm like, "All right, dang it, but you don't know. Like, you're not doing it,
Right.
obviously. You're not responding to the so and you know, that's on me too. But anyway, I think we think that that is what it means to be a decent listener. I think we need to throw that myth out the door. Those may be signs that you are actively listening, but by doing those things does not make you an active listener. Leaning in and actually listening and trying to understand them more is what we need to be doing.
Yeah. Here's some practical things we can do as we work on being and growing our active listening outside of just the uh-huh, yeah, uh-huh, and
Mhm.
making the noises, doing this the gestures, things like that. We actually seek to understand. The first step really, I believe, is to set a goal. Set intention for yourself to improve. It's not going to happen by accident, and it's definitely not going to happen overnight. You've had however many years of your life until maybe this moment of practice of not actively listening all the time. You can't just overcome that in one evening or one morning or 1 hour. It's going to take time. Give yourself that ability to have that time. Don't set yourself a goal of, well, this next week, I'm going to become an active listener. Sure, this next week you can work on that, and the next week, and the next week, and the next week, and the next week, and I can keep going forever. It's you've got to set that goal to improve and give yourself realistic time. I don't think personally this is something that we ever go to a point where we go, okay, I am now an active listener that always understands every time. I think that there are distractions that come into our lives, that come into our conversations that we're going to have to deal with too. We've got to give ourselves that room to grow. It's not going to be just the flip of a switch. We have to give ourselves that time.
Yeah. It's funny. I kind of think of um this is so like maybe not fully in what you're getting at, but you're talking about
Okay.
that like when your attention's wandering and you're focusing back. Like I think of have you ever seen the movie Hitch?
Yes.
I think of Kevin James. Is it Kevin James? I don't
Yeah, it
remember.
is.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Kevin
But
James.
he's getting coached on like how to um talk and like engage in conversation with Alexa Cole and uh one of the things Will Smith says, he's like, when she's talking to you, don't be looking at her mouth. Like, pay
Yes.
attention. It's a like be in that
Yeah.
conversation. And he's in the boardroom, and his mind's wandering to a picture of him or a video of him and Alexa Cole like driving a convertible down Interstate One in California, and he snaps back into place. And um, it's just that whole idea of like engage. But I love that part because his face kind of goes like like, it
Yes.
just,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
really gets super funny and intent. Anyway,
Yep.
that's what I thought of for some reason when you were saying that.
That's
But
perfect.
to your point, though, to your point about, like, setting that goal, I know I've talked about this before, but just having seasons in
Mm,
your life or, like, themes for your seasons that you're going through, if you don't feel like you're a good active listener, and I'm there, then it's healthy to be like, "You know what? The theme of this quarter, the theme of this year, it's to be an active listener. It's
mm,
to make sure that in my conversations, I walk away and I'm not saying grade yourself, but maybe grade yourself. you
mm.
know,
Yeah.
maybe give yourself, hey, what grade would I give myself for of being an active listener in that conversation? And then sit down and flesh it out and be like, I didn't do these things at all. And I don't know that I can even tell you what was so important about that conversation. And like trying to have a theme though, I think is pretty important. When I'm talking with people, and I don't feel like I'm being a good listener, and I don't do this like with every conversation, but when I really feel like, ooh, I'm off. I'm really just into me right now, and I need more discipline here. Uh, I do a thing where I'll ask 3 questions before I give an
Mm.
answer to something. So, like, if they'll ask me a question about something now, if it's like, "Hey, what's your favorite restaurant?" I'm not gonna ask 3 questions and then give an
Right.
answer, but, like, as we're really trying to dig into something or get to know them or something like that, I'll ask 3 follow-up questions to make sure I fully understand before I answer. Fully understand their intention for asking these questions or whatever. But I feel like it's a good way to just at least put some structure and discipline in your life for active listening.
Yeah, that's good. I think being open and curious,
Mm,
kind of going along with those 3 questions is really important. The more you're
mm,
curious, the more you're going to listen with the intent to understand because you want to know, right?
yeah.
And being open too. L- don't make assumptions. Don't make judgments before hear someone out.
Mm,
Making assumptions. Somebody told me this. It makes an ass out of you and me, right? When you assume, and it's stuck with me for years, and it's
mm,
true. I'm finishing your story for you in my head before you finish it. And now I've
yeah.
passed judgment on how you acted or reacted or whatever it is. Let go of those things. Hold those things. Let them finish because I can almost guarantee you their story is going to finish differently than you think. It almost always does.
Yeah, good point. I think the thing as well about the questions you ask and how you kind of dig back into it in that curious way is that um you don't ask yes or no questions. You kind of ask some open-ended questions, ones where they have to like dig into it. Like it's not like, so do you like ice cream? Like, what are your thoughts on ice cream? It's like no, don't go the yes or no. Be like, hey, why do you like this so much? That okay, now they've got to dig into it a little more than just the yes or no kind of stuff. So I think that's part of being open and curious that's helpful.
And be hesitant to give advice. This one
Mm,
gets us in trouble so often. Somebody's telling us a story or they're spilling their guts to us about something other. And the first thing we thought of, instead of listening, is, oh, well, in that situation, I would have done such and such. And now I'm going to share that with them. I'm going to share with them this golden nugget of knowledge that's going to change their life. And all of a sudden, all this situation is going to be better. And the
mm.
reality is they don't want that. They don't need that.
They're
They need
so
a friend.
blessed to know me, though. They're
Right?
so blessed to get my wisdom and my
Isn't it?
knowledge. You're
Right? Isn't it
welcome.
so
You're welcome,
crazy
people.
how arrogant that sounds when we say it out
Mhm.
loud? But when we say it in our heads, we sound like we're the hero. We feel that we're the hero by bringing up this great advice. And it's just not, it's not what they need. It puts us in that place of we're not listening. We're just getting ready to say the next best thing or the next thing on our mind and how to rock the world, how to make everything better, how to be that person that has all the answers and not look stupid and not look unintelligent and not look uninterested. It's just don't do it. It does more harm than good every single time.
Mm.
Put away distractions. We talked about this before. I can't tell you the number of times I've been talking to somebody and I see them. Yep, yep, exactly. They reach in their pocket, they pull up their phone, and I am guilty of this too.
No, I'm
Absolutely
listening.
guilty of it. Yes, exactly. No, no,
Mhm.
keep talking. I'm listening.
Yep.
I promise.
Mhm. Mm.
Seriously.
Mhm. Mm.
And I think it's more prevalent in our society today because of our connectedness to the internet, to those around us through text messages, for phone calls, emails. There's so many ways to get a hold of us that it's easy for us to just disconnect and jump from thing to thing to thing to thing. And this is, I think, part of the reason why it takes so much effort to actively listen and take the time because it does take more time. There's no instant gratification of a text message. Oh, hey, so and so said such and such. Great, I'm going to text them back. And it's 10 seconds. That's not listening. Listening is having that conversation. Put away those distractions. You find yourself drifting, like we talked about, from Hitch, slap yourself back into the situation. Maybe not physically, but bring yourself back into that situation. If you've got to ask a question, ask a couple questions about it that are deeper than just yes or no questions, right? Bring yourself back to it, put those distractions away so that you can actively focus on the conversation in front of you.
Yeah, I actively want to stop talking every time someone picks up their phone as I'm talking to them, and they like
Yes.
pick it up or get a like they'll get a phantom buzz and immediately they're like, "Oh my gosh, this is it. Somebody wants to talk to me." And I'm like, "Hey, I'm talking to you. You're right.
Yes.
Like it's happening right now and you're missing it because you're not being present." Like I kind of I may start the art of just not talking as soon as someone grabs
Yes.
their phone. Just stop and just be
I'm on board
quiet.
with that.
And then they'll look up and I'll be like, "All right, yeah, we'll start again. That sounds good."
Yes. Now that you're
Um
listening.
no, oh, there you are. um They I think I'm laughing about this because, the last few episodes, we were talking about me having a uh, pull string doll that if you pull the pull string, it's like, "Culture, culture," and I've had tons of people come up to me, uh, talking about that pull string doll. Apparently, that's a new thing,
It's a
but
thing. We got to get it made.
it is a thing, but no surprise, creating an environment that's safe for people to actually talk is
Yeah.
probably step one in this whole like how do you actively listen is you got to set the environment in such a way that they feel like they can talk, that they feel that they have a place that they can speak and that you're a safe place, and that doesn't always happen overnight. Okay, sometimes that's got to be built, but the more you fight to understand others, i think I think they're going to see you as a safe place, um,
Yeah.
and a place that's worth making sure things are clarified and expectations are understood. We were talking at the beginning, before we even hopped on this podcast, and I don't know what this popped into my head. I've never done this before, but I think a good icebreaker, like as you're talking about like business icebreakers or like just with other people to help understand, we talked about that sentence icebreaker, like where do you start thinking about what you're going to say, um, on someone's arm or whatever. But I think one could be like breaking two people apart, right? Into groups rather, and say, I want you, John, tell me about Mary, about a story that happened to her, that really mattered to her. And then, like, have them do that, but then have them separate again. And the better one would be tell me why Mary was so impacted by
Yeah.
the story that happened to her that actually really mattered to her.
Hmm.
Because that's the difference. Understanding like the ability to regurgitate a story that mattered to her is not understanding that story at the same level. And I
Yeah.
have seen when people regurgitated stories I told them before and didn't have the heart behind it, how empty it seemed. And yet, when I share a story about how impacted I was about something, that it tends to be where the weight is at.
Yeah. Absolutely, man. It's having that understanding is so key to having the relationship because there's no relationship without it. Hearing and listening are so often used interchangeably, and yet they're so different. We like to think that they're the same, but they're different. Hearing is knowing that story, right? I know the stories. Listening is understanding how that situation affected the person who told you the story, knowing the why, knowing what's behind it, knowing how it hurt them, how it built them, knowing those things and understanding them as a person. That's listening. This is something every leader and I believe every person struggles with at some point in their lives. It's just something we're going to deal with. And we have to make the commitment to step up and to fight, to actively listen, fight to understand. Remember these guidelines. Set the goal to improve. Use the 3 questions before you answer rule. Be open and curious. Put away those distractions. And remember, create an environment that is safe for others to engage with you. Thanks so much for joining us on the Ridgeline Leadership Podcast. See you guys next time.